Welcome back. All right, news of the day video for all you fine people on the internet for your Friday, January the 17th. Starting at the top of the board. So this is an odd one. So last night, Tsyplakov throws a hit on Poehling. And initially it was ruled a 5-minute major, and they reviewed it, and they decided no penalty. That the ruling it looked like was shoulder to shoulder. The replays that I saw during the game, to me, looked shoulder to shoulder. Today, Tsyplakov has a hearing for the hit on Poehling, which really, Poehling looked concussed on the play. I hope he's all right. But now there's a hearing for this. So this is where the question comes up. So what happens to the officials in this case? Every game has somebody watching what the officials are doing. There's the possibility that the officials could face some sort of negative feedback. We don't hear much about that. We haven't seen many cases other than a couple of very public ones where an official gets in trouble with the league. But it is odd to me that it was called 5 minutes, they reviewed it, and unless they didn't have the same angle that the Department of Player Safety is using to decide that this should be a suspension, I'm not sure why they decided it shouldn't be a penalty. So we'll see. I don't think it's going to be a lot. I think it'll be a game, maybe 2 games for Tsyplakov, but we shall see. Lawton was fined for a cross-check on Tsyplakov as well. What's interesting is if Tsyplakov had got 5 in a game, Lawton wouldn't have lost any money because Lawton wouldn't have had Tsyplakov there to cross-check. So just bizarre that those two things are tied together. And so, yeah, we'll see if the officials that worked last night's game, if they work less games or what happens there, right? Kaprizov has been placed on LTIR by Minnesota. They did this strictly so that they could recall Gauntz and Ogren. Minnesota's right up tight against the cap. I think they have like $22,000 in cap space with these moves. Yeah, there's nothing. So Kaprizov's eligible to come off the long-term injured reserve list tomorrow. So Gauntz and Ogren have been recalled. We'll see whether or not Kaprizov's good to go soon. But Gauntz, I like him as a fill-in on the fourth line, and Ogren, good young player. We'll see how things go for Minnesota with them. Dobesh is getting to be quite the story for Montreal. He is now 4-0. His goals against average is below 1, and his save percentage is .963, and he has a shutout. One thing to keep in mind, and one thing that's very interesting about this is that we have seen in the many years I've watched the NHL, there are goalies that come in and they're fantastic out of the gate, and then the NHL figures something out. So you got to keep in mind that these guys probably aren't scouted. There's probably not any sort of knowledge of, how to beat these goalies. The strong start's great. It's fantastic for Dobesh. We'll see once we're a couple of months in whether or not his numbers stay really, really good or if NHLers figure things out. But so far, so good for Dobesh and, of course, for Montreal, who've pulled themselves back into the hunt for a playoff spot. Christensen has signed an extension with the Columbus Blue Jackets. It's a 2-year deal. The cap hit $975,000. Christensen, depth defenseman, and any contract that's below $1 million, there's absolutely zero risk to it because if you send a player to the minors, the cap relief you get is over $1 million. At least that's the limit anyway. So if you send Christensen down, the whole contract would disappear. Not saying that he does or doesn't, just every now and then I'll see where a team signs somebody for like $1 million and fans are, I don't know why they did this. Worst case scenario, you send them to the AHL and the money disappears. So there's no risk to it. But all the best to Christensen and to Columbus, who have won 8 of their last 10. They've looked pretty darn good. We've got quite the race going on in the East. Freddie Andersen has been activated off the injured reserve by Carolina. Tokarski's been sent to the AHL. One thing to keep in mind with Freddie Andersen is he does tend to be injury prone, so we'll see how long he's back for. But it does give Carolina Andersen and Kochetkov. And hey, Tokarski, tip of the hat to him. He did a pretty good job in relief and being called upon in an emergency situation like that. So yeah, Tokarski once again showing he can be a useful goaltender here and there at the National Hockey League level. The Vancouver Canucks, they're back in the headlines, and they're back in the headlines for their struggles. And this is where them losing games in regulation rather than in extra time, I think, is better. And I say that because as a fan, I want to see the team make the right moves and make some serious changes. And the only way you're going to force Patrick Allvin's hand is if they're losing in regulation and losing kind of ugly. They lost ugly last night against LA at home. That's after losing ugly in Winnipeg. I think they've only won 7 home games all season. And yeah, Vancouver desperately needs to make a move. And one thing that's been troubling me with this is Patrick Allvin has never been shy about making moves in his previous seasons. This year, there hasn't been any moves that get made. I don't know if this is a matter of there not being players out there that he's looking for, or if other GMs have seen his track record's not bad and maybe they don't want to do business at this point. So we'll see what happens. There are rumors out there that JT Miller could end up being on the move, but until it happens, it's just a rumor. Now, I am leaving the house today, so that used to be a thing where every time I left the house that something big would happen in the National Hockey League. So maybe. But the Vancouver Canucks have been struggling the whole season. And I'm glad that finally, there's some real headlines with that. I even thought to myself, I could almost do a video on this. But I did a video on the Canucks very recently, so I don't feel like I want to do another Canucks-centered video as of yet. But yes, they need to make a trade. I don't know that you can fix this with a trade. The one thing that throws me is this team is as disjointed now as it was when Bruce Boudreau was in charge, and they fired Bruce over it. So, is Tocchet safe in his job? I feel like he is. I don't feel like there's any chance of Vancouver making a change behind the bench, but should they think about it? This team is playing an awful stretch of hockey. They have, 2 wins in their last 11? It's just been absolutely brutal. But yeah, so the Canucks, and they're in the bottom row in the power rankings right now, so there you go. I'm just giving you guys a bit of a spoiler on tomorrow's power rankings. If they beat Edmonton, they'll move up, and they'll be out of the bottom row. But right now, they're in the bottom row. And by move up, I mean from where they are right now, not from where they were last week. That might jump them back into 23rd. I don't think that's going to happen, though. The Oilers playing pretty darn well. At this point, Vancouver counts as a trap game for Edmonton, and that's just sad. The Edmonton Oilers, kind of an interesting move here. They're signing John Klingberg. So we'll see what the cap hit looks like. I don't think the cap hit's going to be very much. I think for Klingberg, it's about resuming his career. And this could be a really good pickup for the Edmonton Oilers. Depth on the blue line. Wouldn't be called upon to play big minutes, which is important. I don't think we'll see the John Klingberg of old, but he can still be a useful defenseman. And all the best to him in Edmonton. I genuinely wish him well. We'll see how long it takes before he's making his debut for the Oilers. So we talked about Dobesh. I feel like we need to talk about Meriläinen as well, because Meriläinen has really put himself into that conversation as a top 2 goaltender with the Ottawa Senators. What I said about Dobesh also works with Meriläinen as well. Teams not having a book on him. He's relatively unknown at this point. Once he's played a number of games and teams have kind of got a feel for maybe where there's a weakness. Sometimes it's low gloves, sometimes it's high blocker side. It depends on the goaltender, but we'll see what happens with Meriläinen. The reality is, he's outplayed Forsberg when Forsberg's been in the lineup. So I get the feeling it's going to be Ullmark and Meriläinen, and maybe Forsberg ends up being on the move for Ottawa because this is a team that wants to make the playoffs. It's not a San Jose situation where Askarov could still get sent out by San Jose because they're not going to make the playoffs anyways. So, if you're going to go with things and you've got a goalie who doesn't require waivers to get sent down, you just move him. In Ottawa, it's not like that at all. So Forsberg, I would think, either ends up getting traded or maybe ends up getting waived. We shall see. Meriläinen's been excellent. We'll see if that continues for him and the Sens. So this is out there as well in terms of the rumor mill and all of that. So I figured I'd report on it here. And I'm not getting into trade speculation. I don't think Rantanen goes anywhere necessarily, but there are discussions out there that Mikko Rantanen and the Avs are at a stalemate in terms of an extension. Maybe Colorado looked at what Tampa Bay did with Stamkos and said, you know what, we might be smart to be careful with what we do and how much money we allot, how many years we allot for players, and all that fun stuff. Rantanen's an excellent goal scorer, though. I would be very surprised if he gets moved, But maybe he's asking for an insane amount of money that Colorado just either can't or doesn't want to provide to him. They may have that internal. Some teams have an internal cap structure that they want to maintain, and maybe what Rantanen's asking is outside of that. Keep in mind the salary cap's supposed to go up this summer, and not by a small amount either. So Rantanen could be asking for a hefty sum, and he'll probably get it on the market July the 1st if he doesn't re-sign with Colorado. But we shall see. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think he stays in Colorado? I'd be surprised to see Rantanen get moved. But if that's the case, where do you think he'd go? Who do you think would pick him up? And if you're an Abs fan, in the event Rantanen left, what would you like to see them get back for Mikko Rantanen? It would be a huge move if that did take place. We shall see. Keep in mind that when extension talks are at a stalemate, sometimes these trade talks come out publicly is kind of like a way to put pressure on a guy to sign a contract. So we'll see what happens with the Avs and Rantanen. Let me know your prediction on that. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.